Before we begin, if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story like this one. The following short stories were provided by fellow subscribers in the comments section of the Fort Campbell Part 1 video. These stories were inspired by that of the young Army specialist featured in the episode and his bizarre encounter while conducting a night patrol on the massive undeveloped range area of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, known informally as the Back 40. Fair warning, if you haven't watched the episode yet, the following short stories do contain spoilers. After reading through these stories, I organized them by similar experiences. If each consecutive story seems similar to the previous one, that's intentional. These comments were posted completely separate from one another, and none were posted in response to someone else's. Christopher Castanon was stationed at Fort Campbell from 2000 to 2013. The only weird story he remembered was an old German POW gravesite that lies on what's known as Old Clarksville Base. The gravesite is supposedly haunted. When asked to clarify, Christopher explained that as far as he remembered, there were multiple German POW camps in the United States. This one at Fort Campbell held POWs from 1943 to 1946. There were 5 marked graves there and one for an African-American civilian buried around the turn of the century. He'd also heard that there were supposedly haunted places in the family building areas as well as some of the buildings, although he couldn't say which buildings in particular. Hammond Heights and Pierce Village were the family housing areas. The old bunkers in Clarksville Base were quite creepy in their own right. They dated back to the 1950s and 1960s and held nukes at one point. Brad Birch remembered being on ammo guard every night for a month at Campbell. It was boring as hell. The bunkers there were a bit creepy though. His wife was too scared to walk into them and look around. Army Medic 74 just retired from Fort Campbell and spent many hours in the Back 40 in and around Old Clarksville, which had many old ammo bunkers. He used to have to do security checks out there while on staff duty. He never saw anything crazy like that, but always had an eerie feeling while out there. Needless to say, he didn't waste any time completing his checks. Kevin Thibault's memory came flooding back after hearing that monstrous howl in the episode. His experience was in 1995 during guard watch late night at a Fort Knox motor pool. All these years, he thought the Army drill instructors were playing wicked pranks on them. They heard eerie, blood-curdling howls echo from the deep woods across the road beyond the fence. Now he's thinking, what if? David Kerr lives about 3 miles outside Gate 10 of Fort Campbell. They've lived there since 2004. His son had a Boy Scouts camping trip near a lake there in the Back 40. Lake Kyle, he believed, was the name. It was getting pretty late, and David and his son decided they'd walk up one of the ranges to investigate a little, mainly because they wanted to see if they could find spent .50 caliber shell casings laying around. About 20 minutes into their walk, they heard this blood-curdling scream, almost like a woman was being murdered. His first thought was bobcat, which are very common in the area, but something didn't sound right about the scream. It had an almost deep growl to it toward the end, like it was rabid. He could sense the fear slightly in his son's voice as he said they should go back, so they immediately turned tail and made their way back to camp. They stopped at the first nearest camp they reached and asked if anyone else heard the scream, and no one had. They never heard it again that night, nor did they ever see anything. But David always wondered if there was something out there. Then again, sometimes other campers like to play tricks on each other, so you never know. He would like to go back and do some more investigation on a good moonlit night just to see what they could hear or see. Corey Sikaski was at Campbell with the 44th Medical Brigade, 531st Hotel Company, from late 2019 to late 2021. He remembered how eerie Campbell gets at night, especially when there's cloud cover on the moon. There had been a few times he had to be back in the Back 40 at night, but he particularly remembered when he was going out for his expert field medical badge. Every night he'd walk to the stand-in showers that they had at Camp Hinch, and he remembered hearing the howls of something. His NCO just told him that there were wolves out there, but he really couldn't tell. Walking around for land navigation some nights was very creepy, considering they'd only ever have about 20 to 30 people out at a time for all that space. Sometimes it just felt like something was watching you in the pitch black, and you knew there wasn't anyone around you. Normally, you would hear someone looking for a navigation point around you, but no, he'd just stop to look at his map or something, and just wouldn't feel right sometimes, as if the air didn't feel right. Evangelist Kanto Georgakos shared that one night during his military service, he was a sentry at the fence perimeter of the base. It was very late at night, and he was waiting for his replacement. Suddenly, he heard a blood-curdling scream that shook him to his core. Fortunately, it was just a fox, but it almost scared him to death. Weber lived in Kentucky and came across these creatures as well. They do migrate. He couldn't say why they gave chase, but he walked trails daily, so they knew his scent and where and what he did. Just as soon as you see them, they blend in when you look, but yes, they are there. They migrate in a clan, he guessed, maybe all related somehow. It was rare to see only one at a time. There were always at least one and then another or a few around. He found areas where they had footprints one day, hanging out all amongst pine trees. The next day he went back. It was as if someone took a brush and wiped them all away. But there was an assortment of sizes, even smaller ones. Mia Tolliver was never at Fort Campbell, but at Fort Bragg, and two of them saw a big something bipedal, covered with longish hair, taller than her Jeep, shortly before dawn. Weird stuff out there, no lie. Rod Stark believed it sounded as if they encountered Dogman, not Bigfoot. He spent 3 years at Fort Campbell. It was his first active duty station in 1994. They were in the woods a lot in field artillery. Twice on guard duty, he saw a large 8 or 9 foot tall dark figure run by their camp perimeter at night out in the back areas. He wondered about it, but he didn't feel worried. In field artillery, you're surrounded by your entire battery of men, about 60 of them, all night long for every field exercise. John Butterworth left Fort Campbell a year before Robert got there in the 1980s. He's sure there's a ley line there. For those not familiar with the concept, ley lines are lines that crisscross around the globe like latitudinal or longitudinal lines. They're dotted with monuments and natural landforms and carry along with them rivers of supernatural energy. Along these lines, at places they intersect, there are considered pockets of concentrated energy that can be harnessed by certain individuals or possibly creatures. The whole area, even off-post, has some magical places they explored regularly. John experienced some loss of time there a few times. More than likely, there are deep underground military bases there with things going on. What a perfect spot to hide stuff or open portals. Even Bigfoot found a place to hide. Tag, you're it. Skinny White Guy M's oldest son is with the 101st Airborne, Screaming Eagles at Fort Campbell. There are many soldiers who have seen and heard these creatures there on base. They have an enormous deer population, and that's what makes it a paradise for any apex predator. There is likely very minimal human traffic in the thousands of acres of woodlands. Cameron Lott recalled doing some night ops on Campbell, getting dropped off by the helicopters several kilometers out to conduct a movement to the target. They walked up on something big. They never saw anything, but it certainly sounded like it was running on 2 feet. They were told to continue mission. They did. Mr. Pavey is stationed at Fort Campbell and will definitely be keeping his eyes peeled for Bigfoot or goblins on training events at night now. 13 Bravo was stationed on Fort Ord, California, or Planet Ord, as it was called, with the 7th Infantry Division Light. He recalled doing a 25-mile road march with his unit. They started at night around 9 p.m. As they were stretched out in that accordion effect of a long column of soldiers, they went by what appeared to be an old cemetery next to the road. The odd thing was, there were what appeared to be green chem lights hanging in the trees. Their entire unit saw this and thought, how odd. Coyote 959 noted there's a Ouija board carved into the deck plates of main engine room number 1 on his guided missile destroyer. There have also been reports of a little girl appearing on the ship at night. He's never seen her, but he has a bottle of holy water on board. He ain't got no time to deal with that stuff on watch. 6 Turning for Burning was in the Air Force from 1995 to 1999 as a weather observer stationed at Pope Air Force Base in Fort Bragg. At the far western end of the reservation is Camp Mackall Army Airfield. When he was there, it was just a couple of runways and roads with a couple of small buildings and a tower. Most of the time, only a couple of guys in the tower and a weather observer was stationed out there because the place served as an emergency landing airfield. However, the place wasn't manned 24/7. At midnight, the people signed off and left, and the airfield remained unmanned for about 8 to 10 hours. He had heard 2 stories about Mackall. First, a Special Forces guy was murdered out there while he was jogging. The second story probably explains why he was killed. Drug smugglers would fly small airplanes in and out of there when the place was shut down at midnight. He did a shift out there himself to close out the observation station after the Air Force used the place for a deployment exercise. And he can say that, yeah, Mackall is out in the middle of nowhere, and he can believe both stories. The dirty badger, having seen and been stalked by the giant cats of Afghanistan, caracal are what they're called. These weren't as big as mountain lions and not as stocky as lynx or bobcats. They were longer, slender, and about the size of a large Labrador. They had a drone operator radio them one night when he picked up thermals. He told them that they had a lion or a leopard stalking them about 25 to 40 meters to their right side. All they could see was nothing but the deadly grape fields. Artillery fired some illumination for them, but they never saw it. The guys in the Tactical Operations Center got the drone feed on a big flat screen, and they got to see it. He also saw some of the famous vampire deer, musk deer. There's plenty of crazy-sounding stuff out there that people don't believe is real. Kurt Johnson was listening to this while driving around on duty as an MP in the Middle East. As soon as he heard the intro, he thought the specialist was probably an MP. He's only seen one strange thing since being out there, nothing super noteworthy, but they did have a patrolman state that he thought he saw a shadowy figure walk through a perimeter fence. The soldier immediately rushed to the location and found nothing. Very strange. Alastair Moonley-like Moody served on Fort Campbell and was doing some field training. He had to pull roaming guard at night. He and his buddy looked up at the night sky to see little lights moving around, like little stars dancing around and with each other. They were moving way too fast to have been man-made and moved around in unnatural ways. There's undoubtedly something weird about that place. Tough Girl 922 was in the U.S. Navy from 1982 to 1986, based at Pearl Harbor, and worked on Ford Island. They say the enlisted barracks out there are haunted. She never made it out there to check it out, but she did walk around the hangars, and yes, you can see the strafe marks on the buildings from the World War II attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. She's not been back since, but she hears there is a bridge out to the island now. Progress. Linny's husband works in a building on Sabre Airfield at Fort Campbell. He says he has seen strange supernatural things in his office, black shadows and moving furniture. He watched an office chair begin to spin so fast it was slung across the office. He took authority over his space and commanded every evil spirit to leave in the name of Jesus Christ, and it all stopped. He says there are so many people that come in and out of his office, and most of them have demonic attachments, so they bring these evil spirits with them. She knows most people may not believe it, but these things are real. Deckhand Admiral attended petty officer leadership training around 2007 or 2008 at Naval Station Great Lakes. The base stuck them in one of their less used barracks, Building 534, and there was a second similar barracks next to it. They were both almost derelict in shape and probably last used by active Navy in the late 1980s. They held typical barracks security watches, and for the 2 weeks they were there, every middle watch log entry had something wild reported. The first few days they thought it was all jokes, being a bunch of dumb 15 to 18-year-olds, but that quickly changed. The experiences logged ranged from unexplained loud noises on third deck to unexplained electrical failures on second deck, like lights flickering, knocking heard on the front door with no one there or outside the building, to the security lock bands placed around the stairwell access doors that were supposed to designate off-limits areas being broken every night, only to be replaced, and then the next roving watch checks on the tags to find them broken again. Over the middle weekend, they had a group of Boy Scouts stay in the building. Their troop leader came down both nights they were there to complain about how loud and awful the cadets on the third deck were being and that they needed to be disciplined. They had only males on the first deck and a few rooms for females on the second. Third deck was completely empty, with its bunk room doors supposed to be locked out and secured. The second week, it ramped up to roving watches getting stranded in the dark, with lighting failures and their flashlights failing at the same time. Mind you, there were no electrical issues during daylight. They heard voices and shouts throughout the building on the various decks, to the most hair-raising, with the apparent phantom persons being chased through the second and third decks for about an hour, being reported as seeing the leg or an arm of a person turn the far corner, and then giving chase to catch the person, only to find nothing and turn back to see the same thing at the previous corner. Toward the conclusion of the training, the incidents and reports had been addressed by the command staff, usually retired reservists or board active duty helping out, and resulted in having the third deck totally locked out and at least one of the command staff stand with each watch, to which they would hear and see the same things being reported, but would never acknowledge them or say anything about it other than, "It's just an old building, don't bother checking on it," and walk back into their office and shut the door. Ozark Mountain Wanderer noted they've seen lots of apparitions on charge of quarters in the old 2nd 320th Field Artillery Barracks. Ricto 66 LCC was with the 3rd Battalion 502nd Infantry Regiment in Fort Campbell from 1993 to 1997. This was the same infantry battalion which suffered that horrible plane crash returning from Sinai back in 1985. He was a buck sergeant back then, and some of his young soldiers living in the barracks would tell him that they would sometimes hear what sounded like a basketball being bounced against the wall inside barracks rooms which should have been empty. They believed the ghosts of those lost soldiers returned to the one place they left forever, haunting those barracks. These last stories were inspired by the personal story about the midnight pizza run out into the Hawaiian jungle. Das Wolf was stationed at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii twice. At Fort Carson, he was with an aviation unit, and they ordered pizza so many times the commanding general signed a letter banning all pizza deliveries on the ranges. Well, that didn't stop them. Either a bigger tip was in order, or they would meet the drivers at the gate to the ranges. Deep Ranger 930 recalled his time in the Navy stationed in Bahrain. They'd order food while out in the patrol boat, and some poor delivery guy would be out on an abandoned pier, sometimes at night in the pitch black, when a heavily armed boat would pull up, hand him his money, and they got their food. They just acted like it was par for the course. They must have had some good stories. Eric the Mage was stationed at Campbell at the exact same time. He thought the post as a whole was kind of creepy. The shadows of Vietnam hung heavy on it. Everything in the Army seems shiny and new now. He was in a long time, but back then, the equipment and buildings dated from Vietnam all the way back to World War I, and thanks to years of budget cuts, looked like it. The only new things were the battle dress uniforms. Chances are Robert was still carrying an M1911A1 .45 caliber pistol. Those guns were awesome when new, but by 1988, the newest were made around 1965, and some in World War II. Most were so worn out they barely worked. The Army phased in the M9 Beretta pistols the same year. While he heard some spooky stories, he never experienced anything supernatural there. Pizza was ordered from the field, though. Even before cell phones, there were range towers that had landlines you could break into and order pizza on. The delivery drivers were often moonlighting soldiers or former soldiers who knew the military grid reference system. They could navigate out there as long as it was a coordinate near the road. Rumor had it, one pizza company even had its own military-grade radio for taking field delivery orders. Sapper Joe's story of the pizza guy reminded him of a training exercise in the Army National Guard back in the very early 1990s. They were told that the opposition forces during the training event was using a certain paved road in the training area and to set up an ambush on it, which they did. Someone forgot to prevent the road's access to other people not involved in the training, so some unlucky civilian employee got on that wrong road. Luckily, she didn't drive her car into a tree when they started to open up with their blanks, smoke grenades, and artillery simulators, then rushing the car for intel. It did take a while to finally calm her down when they realized that she was not part of the training exercise, but he is sure she always had a good story for parties after that. David Ferlini, United States Marine Corps, 1964 to 1968, noted this Fort Campbell story reminds him of walking guard duty at the Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. As for fun in the jungle, the only jungle he's ever been in was in Vietnam, and he doesn't recall having any fun times in that jungle. Semper Fi. Thank you to everyone who took the time to share their stories. Although these accounts don't include all of the ones shared, they were selected to remain relevant to the general nature of the episode itself. If you enjoyed these accounts and want to hear more stories like this, please hit that like button, share this with someone who loves mysterious encounters, and drop your own experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another episode. Take care and stay safe out there.